Hey guys, welcome back. For the purpose of YouTube, I am going to point out that this is purely entertainment and that please don't take anything as truth, and I encourage everyone to look at the evidence in front of them. Do your own research. With that said, I am going to say that this right here is exactly how I felt yesterday. I went down, yes, a rabbit hole. It wasn't so much of a rabbit hole. It was more something that, a coincidence that I was drawn to, that I found interesting. It was just morbid curiosity, let's say. But then I saw a video, which I will post later on. And let's just say light bulbs were flashing all over. Everything made perfect sense, and I felt like a kid at Christmas, which is really strange considering everything that I am about to say is going to make everybody really angry, and it made me angry myself. But I think the actual realization of everything clicking into place, it making 100% sense, that's it. I feel like I have so uplifted. I could not sleep last night. It was brilliant. Let's get into it. So the other day I posted this up on X, and I found it interesting. For one, I'm half Italian, so I just looked at it, and it was a piece of information I didn't know. I stumbled across it. Factoid of the day. Did you know that once upon a time in the 17th century, Washington, D.C., before it became Washington, D.C., was actually called Rome, Maryland, owned by an Italian cultural enthusiast named Francis Pope? Claimed his vision to build Rome within America, he renamed Goose Creek to Tiber Creek to mirror Rome's iconic river, Tiber. Both Rome, Italy, and Rome, Washington were built upon 7 hills. According to biblical prophecy, the city built on 7 hills will be destroyed. It's interesting to look at the architectural similarities between Washington and the Vatican. I wonder if there are any more comparisons between the two. I knew what I was alluding to here, but I didn't want to go down that road in case without actual information. But it wasn't like I was going to go rushing to search for it either. But I just found this interesting. I also find it interesting that we live in a world where Pope Benedict abdicated as Pope, and in place we have Pope Francis. I just found it really fascinating. In regards to the 7 hills, I haven't really dived into that at all. It's one of those, and that, yes, it is built on 7 hills, so is the Vatican, but then so other cities claim. So again, it's one of those things that I'm throwing to one side at the moment. So here is Washington, D.C., the Capitol Hill, and here is the Vatican. As you can see, it has that dome with the pinnacle point in the centre, and the other thing that struck me was the columns that create like sort of a canopy at the entrance, as well as this vast open space that is in front of it. So it's sort of the bird's eye view. So Washington, D.C., and then this is the view from the Vatican. And if you take a look, the obvious thing is obviously that narrow point, that long line, the bird's eye view, so to speak, but also it's this what they're called as obelisks. Now, the one at the Vatican, if you notice, has a clock on the floor, sort of alluding to the fact that the obelisk is in fact a sundial, which it is, but that's sort of a red herring. It's to throw you sort of off the scent. You can ignore it. It's the obelisk itself and the view. Obviously, this got me thinking, but, you know, I wasn't really searching through it that much. But it wasn't until that I was scrolling through social media, I think I was on TikTok, and a video came up, which I will show you later on. That's when the light bulbs in every single room switched on, and I had to dig deeper. It was brilliant. But in order to show you, I would suggest at the moment, clear your mind, take everything back to neutral, and forget about the monarchy and everything that you have learned over the last 6 years, and everything will make sense. So imagine my surprise when I find out there's a third location. Yeah, this is in London, and this is Trafalgar Square. If you notice, again, we have the same architectural building, the dome, the columns, the open space. So you wonder, oh, okay, what about the obelisk? Okay, well, it's a column with a statue on top, as you can see, and it's a red herring. But what you can see is that line, and if you look to the left-hand side, you can see the Houses of Parliament. There's Westminster. But then it dawned on me. So as you can see, you've got Buckingham Palace. We have UK Parliament that goes alongside the River Thames, and we have Trafalgar Square. And if you notice, they're all within a bit of a triangle. But I want to show you where number one is and what is there. And boom, here we go. Here is what is called Cleopatra's Needle. Here is the London obelisk, and this was imported in from Egypt. Guess what? It's a set of 3. One happens to be in, as you can see here, London. Another one happens to be in America, in New York. And the other one, for some reason, seems to be in Paris. I haven't had a look as to why. But yeah, here it is on the River Thames, in line with Parliament. So at this point, I was like, whoa, this is too much of a coincidence. You would even be forgiven to be thinking that actually this could possibly be planned. So the thing that I was alluding to about comparisons between Washington and the Vatican in my tweet was this. This is the difference between Vatican City and the Holy See. So the Vatican City is the smallest country in the world with a population of 1,000 people. The Holy See is the administrative body of the worldwide Catholic Church. The Pope is the head of both the Vatican City and the Holy See. The Holy See is administered by Roman Curia. Now, basically, I have always known this, and ironically, as for a place of holy worship, the pinnacle of our Christian, Catholic religion, ironically, this is the actual place where I visited, and I turned my back on faith, not on all religions. I wasn't there. I wasn't thinking, it wasn't that I didn't believe or anything like that. It's just, I turned my back on there, and it was because of the fact that outside of the Vatican gates, there was a man, ironically dressed in a black cloak, hooded, and he was preaching atheism. And at that point, that in itself became a religion. So I just chose not to identify with any form of religion and then just allow people to believe what they want to believe, because everyone has that right. But I always knew, and I always found it really fascinating, and it stuck with me, the fact that the Vatican is a country within a country. So it is not ruled, it is not governed by the Italian people. It has absolutely no part in it. In fact, back in the day, I don't know whether it still is like this, but when I went, you even needed like a separate visa, and that's what opened the door to the question as to going, why the hell? Fair enough, I don't have an Italian passport, but you know, I was there going, why do I need to be looking at having separate paperwork to go into the Vatican? And it was then that it was explained that obviously it was governed by itself. The administrative Holy See was in fact the government, to which they can then make their own rules, regulations. They didn't have to abide by the Italian rule, and it just, to me, that was fascinating. And that's what I was alluding to with the comparisons, and I didn't want to jump down that road in case it was just pure coincidence, let's say. So I went down this rabbit hole a little bit further, and I thought, right, okay, I don't really know much about American history. I understand London, I understand the Vatican. I've been down that road, and I understand bits and pieces of the American history, so I was going to dive in a little bit deeper. So I went back to the beginning, and I started in 1606, which brought me to the first Virginia Charter, which obviously brought in the British rule, the colony to Virginia, and in particularly in 1607, Jamestown. Now, the Virginia Charter obviously is the documents that gave the kings permission to start a colony. Jamestown was the first, and in return for permission to settle the colony, the Virginia Company of London sent profits back to the king. So basically, essentially, the king didn't provide very much for the people, the American people that they colonized, but he reaped a lot of rewards. What's equally as fascinating is in 1611, King James also had his own version of the Bible. All right. So, and it's the Bible that we know and we go by today. Now, if you were to Google who owns the copyrights for this version of the Bible, you will see that it actually belongs to the head of the monarchy. So at the moment, King Charles, which in turn allows the monarchy to alter any part or retract any part of the Bible that they wish, because they own the copyright. It's interesting, that, isn't it? It's also interesting that in this version of the Bible, there are only 66 books that make up this Bible. And yet, there are just shy of 800 books. So, there is nearly 716, it could be more, I don't know. But there are so many hundreds of books that are not available to the likes of you and I. They are being held at the Vatican. Interesting. So when you see sugars discussing, Princess Meghan and King Harry and everything, and first thing you always see is the Americans coming going, you're absolutely insane. We fought a war, rid us of the monarchy. We have no monarchy here in America. And the Treaty of Paris in 1783 is the treaty that was signed, this documents, the contract as such, that was done for American freedom. So the Treaty of Paris, signed in Paris by the representatives of the King George III of Great Britain and representatives of the United States on September the 3rd of 1783, officially ended the American Revolutionary War and recognised the 13 colonies which had been part of the colonial British America to be free, sovereign and independent states. That is the war that they talk about. And that, what I will say is that it wasn't 100% free, because what King George was able to do was to go, yeah, fair enough, and that, be free, be independent and that, but you can still pay me and that. So he was still reaping some benefits from the American people. But this is where it kind of all went to shit, basically. It took a darker turn because the War of 1812 was when the United States declared war upon Britain. And it actually lasted, it was supposed to, theoretically, 2 to 3 years, but it was 3 years before peace was actually were agreed and through the Treaty of Kent. And that, however, what I will say is it was the beginning of a sequence of wars for the American people. And that, in fact, it was like 60 years worth of war, and which put them into a Great Depression. It literally financially ruined them. And it began with this war with us, which I'm going to be honest, as a British person, I never knew, I was never taught in history that at one point the United States declared war upon Britain. I didn't know that. I don't know how many other British people did or was taught it, but I know my history lessons did not include that. So it's been sort of hidden from the British people, that bit. But I can understand as to why, considering we burnt their capital to the ground. Washington, the architecture, everything. Destroyed. All the writings, all the treaties, everything. It was all burnt. So, yeah, we didn't do him any favours. And for that, I apologise to the American people on behalf of my ancestors. Because by the end of the wars, became the darkest time in American history, and in fact, the most treasonous thing the government could have ever done was this. This was the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871, which is an act of Congress that repealed the individual charters of the cities of Washington and Georgetown and established a new territorial government for the whole of the District of Columbia. Though Congress repealed the territorial government in 1874, the legislation was the first to create a single municipal government for the federal district. Essentially, this was the birth of the DC on the Washington. This was the birth of Washington, DC being a governing body in its own country, a country within a country. Okay, and this is a further look at it. So please feel free to pause, look and have a look. But it is a treasonous act, and essentially it was a back step. And this back step was the gateway, the open door for the Americans to accept the British rule again. And that may sound mental, but essentially what they did by having that District of Columbia and their own government, they became the Vatican. But not only that, it also allowed them to move away from the US Constitution as the American people live by today, because essentially it opened the door to allow people like the CIA, the FBI, all of these to make their own legislation that didn't have to coincide with that US Constitution. In fact, they actually took on the Lex Fori pattern, which is the same as what the Vatican take on. So it replicas, in a way, it's sort of it can take the US Constitution as a guideline, but it's not actually cemented within the Washington DC Congress. So the Lex Fori is a choice of law rule. If applicable, it provides that the law of the jurisdiction or venue in which a legal action is brought applies. When a court decides that it should, by reason of the principles of conflict of law, resolve a given legal dispute by reference to the laws of another jurisdiction, the lex causae, the lex fori still govern procedural matters. And people need to really look at this, because this is the Constitution that Washington DC goes by. And it uses the US Constitution, as you know, as a smoke and mirrors. Further evidence to this is this is the case of the missing 13th Amendment to the Constitution. And this is done in 2016. If you look at Iowa, they are looking to bring it back, right? So basically the missing amendment that is hidden from the public is the Titles of Nobility Act. The 13th Amendment of the US Constitution as it stands is known as the Abolishment of the Slavery Act. So this Titles of Nobility Act was hidden, and it seems to be hidden of some consequence, really. I mean, why hide a part of the American Constitution? So people need to be following that, especially considering everything that we are seeing today with Harry and Meghan. It opens so many doors. Roll on to 1912, and you're going to go, Lady Alison, why the hell are you throwing the Titanic at us? Because it's important. Because here's the thing. 1912 was when the Titanic sank, or so we believe. Now, a ship did sink, but what has been hidden in history is actually the Titanic was one of 3 ships that were made at the same time. Except the Titanic was built with higher standards and that unsinkable trademark. So what if I actually said to you, guess what? The Titanic never sunk, because the Titanic never set sail that day. In fact, the ship that sunk was the sister ship whose name was Olympic. And it wasn't built with the same standards as the Titanic and not classed as an unsinkable ship. And in fact, this whole thing has been alluded to us within the movie itself. But here is the comparisons between the two ships. And I don't know about you, but if ever you've gone on holiday, do you really pay attention to the plane that you're getting on? Because I don't. I mean, I know there are probably people that probably do, but I definitely don't. I just want to get on holiday, put me in front of the sun and throw me a glass of whatever the bar is throwing at me. But these are the two ships. So on the left we have the Olympic and then we have the Titanic. There's not much difference, okay? But then you'd go, well, why would they change the names? They changed the names at the last minute because guess what? And this is what is alluded to in the movie, and we all missed it, okay? So Rose studied the Titanic's passenger list. She understood Jack's concern. Every prominent businessman opposing the creation of the Federal Reserve was on board. What a way to get rid of the opposition of a Federal Reserve, the central bank, and that by essentially having them in a catastrophic tragedy. And that this is why Rose was very keen to get to the bottom of it with the engineer itself, and also went on to question the amount of lifeboats there was in accordance to the number of passengers. But even the engineer at the time didn't even realise that they had purposely switched the names that was the Titanic and the Olympic so that they could essentially get away with murder. Lo and behold, it was a success as the Federal Reserve Act passed United States Congress and was signed into law in 1913 without challenge. It's funny that, isn't it? So, the Federal Reserve Act was passed by the 63rd United States Congress and signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson on December the 23rd, Merry Christmas, 1913. The law created the Federal Reserve System, the central banking system of the United States. The Panic of 1907 convinced many Americans of the need to establish a central banking system, which the country had lacked since the bank war of the 1830s. Again, it was passed in by Democrats. I'm not saying that there's coincidences there, but there are coincidences there. But this is where not only did you have the British rule, you have DC, which has become a country in a country, and it presides over essentially the corporation that is the United States. But the Federal Reserve, the biggest shareholder was the Rothschilds. And he was the most important representative on the Federal Reserve. And in fact, the Federal Reserve wasn't so much a bank, a central bank for the United States, it was the Bank of England. It's shocking. The years that you'd spent getting rid of the monarchy, and from 1871 and all through these lovely little back channels you were able to bring back the monarchy. And they've been hiding there in plain sight, even to this day. So I advise that people have a look into this person and the links between the IG Farben and to Germany during the World Wars. Because I guarantee that is going to blow a lot of minds. Right, I'm not going to go into it here. That's a completely different story, but please research it. Research Paul Warburg. That's all I'll say. So yeah, essentially what this all became was something known as the Empire of, that should be in quotes, but the city. And it is the City of London, Washington, D.C. and Vatican City. Because what better way to disguise a country, even though they are geographically in different places, they are of one law, one regime. What better way to disguise it than by calling it something as mundane as the city? Nobody would bat an eyelid, would they? But here we go. So essentially, the City of London is the central bank, i.e. the Federal Reserve, and that it is the financial pillar. Okay, the City of London is 1 square mile, a secret country. Yes, UK, London is not immune. It is, again, separate. It is its own country, subject from the UK, and is the world's financial background for the elite and money men of the world. Obviously, as it makes sense, and that the spiritual pillar is the Vatican City, and the Vatican is the spiritual capital of the world, and it's in the centre of Rome. Italy houses the Pope, but again, a separate country. Now, the military pillar is obviously Washington, D.C. I wonder if many, now that I've mentioned military pillar, the light bulbs have switched on. So this is the flag of Washington, D.C. As you notice, the 3 stars. So this is the flag of the District of Columbia. It is a 10-mile secret state subject from the US Constitution within Washington, D.C. So these people are not working in the interests of the country that they technically reside within. They are working in the interests of themselves. And it's all here in this book. Now, this book is on Amazon, but I will it's actually archived, and I think it's archived because of the fact that people need to read it. Okay, this is the second volume. It was published in the beginning of 2000s, I believe. I will put a link in the description. It's 113 pages long, and it is very long-winded. But guess what? Even in the very beginning, back in early 90s, it references the inevitable war that was planned, that is World War III, and being with Russia. So all these people that have turned around and gone, oh, it is prophecy and all of this is what they've been looking at. They've been looking at the hidden agendas, and that's the problem. The British monarchy has essentially been hiding behind the curtains of the American people, and the American people are not aware. And that their entire financial status is based within London, and their hiding of the Titles and Nobility Act as part of their constitution also, again, it explains as to why Harry is getting away with everything. But as I say, if you think that the British people aren't being shafted as well, oh boy, enjoyed this next video.
Has the UK got a finance curse?
Is it a trick question? Because the UK doesn't have finance. The City of London has, and it's not part of the UK.
Good answer. Good answer. It's international, is right.
The City of London is outside the United Kingdom. Do you know that? It's really shocking. And therefore it's also not part of the EU, which explains although it couldn't be part of the EU because you have to have democratic elections, and the City of London doesn't, right? It's the banks that have the votes, right?
Right.
Per staff, you know, the voting system.
How do you start unpicking this puzzle?
I never knew. That's a very useful piece of
And
information.
of course, it's not part of the
It's a pretty dangerous piece of information.
And it's not part of the UK because the Queen is not allowed to enter without permission. She's not the sovereign, therefore it's not part of the UK. You know, and of course that's since 1688.
I'll have to make a note.
Since the foreign invasion.
Yep, there's the big boom. And of course, for America,
In the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington. The District of Columbia flies its own flag and has its own independent constitution. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the First Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like king or prince or baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the king. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words, "In God we trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for roads, bridges, and other public. Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the President is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the President is President of the Corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen and whose land is called Crown Land, the United States is just another crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. In D.C. city-state, the obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The Secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk's cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk, including the Knights Templar Masonic Order. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. In Vatican City, another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square.
Shocking, honestly. Shocking for every single person, whether you are American, whether you are British, because this is being hidden from us. And I know what you're probably thinking, what's this all got to do with the monarchy and what we're seeing today with Meghan and Harry? Well, buckle up, because here is my opinion, and based upon evidence and common sense, it's the only thing that makes sense to me. And that is that Meghan and Harry and this feud and everything that we have seen with the monarchy of late, over the last, 6-7 years, has all been smoke and mirrors. That there is no feud, it doesn't exist. And this is all one big plan and part of a diversion tactic that they are working together, because it doesn't make any sense at all. For one, everybody by now is aware of Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and thankfully, due to our elections at the beginning of the month, a lot of eyes got opened to this globalist agenda and the amount of politicians that were involved in becoming members of these World Economic Forum. And I'll point out that the very, very minimum that they are allowed to pay is $500,000 just to become a member. they have to physically pay. It's not something that you just fill in an application and boom. No, they've had to physically pay to be a part of this globalist agenda. And all our politicians are a part of it. Politicians that tanked the economy. Politicians that opened our borders to immigrants. Politicians that told us, you know what? You need to stay at home, save lives. Politicians that encouraged us to take a poisonous vaccine. Politicians that put us into an illegal war, destroyed our NHS. Mayors that have turned our capital city into a no-go zone full of crime. There's a level of corruption that these people have physically paid to be a part of. But yet our blind loyalty to the monarchy, we have completely ignored the fact that we have a king who is also a member, who has physically paid to be a part of this globalist agenda. And in Klaus Schwab's own words, the famous quote, "You will have nothing and you will like it." And yet our blind loyalty will not even allow ourselves to question the integrity of these people a part of this organisation. And if you think that King Charles is the only one, he's not. Prince William is too. Prince William has also paid to be a part of that, to make our lives a misery. And yet we stand here and put them on a pedestal because we fear the possibility that actually, you know what, our monarchy could just be equally as corrupt. And I'll carry on, and there are literally mountains of evidence. And when you literally sit back and think that actually your monarchy and Prince Harry and Meghan are actually working together with the information that I have provided with you today, honestly, things suddenly start to make a hell of a lot more sense than what they do trying to question it on X. Why is it that people today are still fighting tooth and nail for the list, the Jeffrey Epstein list, the list that all these elites are basically on, including Prince Andrew? But we turn a blind eye to it. In fact, not a single arrest has ever been made. No, what we have is Prince Andrew basically gone, oh, do you know what? Shove him in a corridor. You know, nobody will notice. Eventually, as long as he's out of the way, people give up with him. So instead of actually him suffering any consequences, he is allowed to walk away from the issue completely scot-free. All because he is a monarchy. Explain to me how that would you have Prince Andrew around your children, knowing what you know just today? Would you have him there? Would you leave him alone with your teenage daughters? Because I sure as hell wouldn't. Why is it that we don't question the fact that Jeffrey Epstein and Maxwell ended up lodging in royal abodes for free whenever they wanted. We don't question the fact that they were there under their roofs, but yet we'll argue the toss because of the fact that Harry is over in America in his abode, and people are questioning why he's allowed to get away with talking about the US Constitution. We don't question the fact that King Charles, his top aide, his top advisor, was Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile, who it didn't make a difference whether they had a pulse. Like, again, would you leave your children alone in a room on the sofa with Jimmy Savile? The answer is no. Nobody with any form of common sense, any form of decency would allow themselves to be in a room with Jimmy Savile if he were alive. But yet, we ignore the fact that King Charles was advised by this man. King Charles, who happens to be best buddies with this guy. A guy that will do pretty much anything, even allegedly to his own deceased mother. So that brings me to Meghan Markle and Harry. And why they are getting away with absolutely everything. Because we see YouTubers time and time again that put out evidence, literally questions as to go, please explain to me why her baby bump dropped to her ankles. Please explain to me why she can do this, why that, we question that line of succession. And guess what? Because you saw it, you are a criminal. You are going to have your life threatened. You're going to be censored. You're going to have all your personal information thrown out there into the world. You're going to have your accounts hacked. All of those things. And yet, nothing ever gets done. Nothing ever happens. It just so happens that, the only MP in this country that tried to remove the titles and put the bill in motion in Parliament, and just at the time that the second hearing was about to come out, all of a sudden, I'm going to announce a general election. What? Of course you are. Years and years and years of attacks these two have caused, not just to the monarchy, but to people, to the Markle family, and not one repercussion. Not a single thing. In fact, just like every other royal member, they are protected. Just like Andrew, just like Charles, just like Prince William, and being a member of that World Economic Forum. Because we don't want to question the integrity of the monarchy, because that doesn't fit our narrative. That doesn't fit this ideology that we have been brought up to believe. Nothing ever makes sense. And I would seriously look at the Royal Grift, who once put out a video about the 77th Brigade. And, have a chat with Trevor, join one of his lives or something, and, ask him to explain what his knowledge of it is. And to know that there are government organisations that are physically paid with our money to troll these people. Now, if you look at, say, Avid Gardner, who I noticed recently, and that had her WhatsApp hacked, who also pointed out that, one of the IP addresses came from the Cotswold area. The only people in the Cotswolds that have any connection with these sugars and Harry and Meghan is, in fact, guess what? The royal family at Highgrove. And yet, her WhatsApp gets hacked. Now, I am quite technical minded. I can deal with algorithms and I can do all that. That's absolutely fine. But ask me to hack somebody's WhatsApp. That's a bit much. I wouldn't even know where to begin. So, and even people that I know that are even more technically minded, they wouldn't even know to begin. But guess what? It's easy for people on the inside, isn't it? People that have access to these social media sites. I mean, how many times, even on X, we've seen it. People are allowed to make explosive threats towards a monarchy, and it's allowed to stay on there for 6 days. Only until we notice and suddenly demand something get done out of fear. See, Meghan Markle and Harry are forced down our throats every single day, and then they send out crappy little jams and all of this, and they are made to look like absolute idiots. People cannot be that much of an idiot. I know there's idiots on a lot of fan bases. I mean, look at the Swifties. There are crazy monarchists. There are crazy sugars. But the reality here is that there's people protecting Harry and Meghan from these acts. And these acts are a distraction from the fact that Harry is legally bound by the titles of nobility and the British rule over America. He is an heir, and if people look into that Titles of Nobility Act, they will see that he doesn't technically need a visa, which may be the reason why Biden is working so hard to cover it up. Because imagine the outrage of the American people if they actually found out that he wasn't actually there on any form of visa. The visa doesn't exist. There is no paperwork because guess what? It's under British rule and he's an heir. And this is where it becomes a problem for Meghan Markle, because according to that Nobility Act, the minute that she married into the royal family, she ceased her claim as an American citizen. She is no longer an American citizen because of her title. That thing that is conveniently hidden away from you. So guess what? The good news is in America is you can also deport her. The children, again, as successors to Harry, have claim, but they are not American, even though Lilibet is born within the US of A. Because of the fact that she has that title of princess, means she has no claim of American citizenship because she can't have both. So you see, right now, Meghan Markle is probably in the worst position ever, because should Harry ever divorce her, then essentially she is a woman without a country. So it doesn't matter really what these two do. They can lie in law, in high court cases. They can commit the most horrendous crimes, and it's not going to make a difference because this is the end goal. And you can laugh, but how many times have we heard about Princess Meghan? How many times have we heard about King Harry? It's as if little seeds have been planted from somewhere, haven't they? And the sugars have watered it and allowed it to grow. But based on all the information that I have provided and the significance of 3. When you actually put your head to it, you have King Charles. King Charles, who's head of the church. Therefore, he is the pillar of the Vatican. And then you have Prince William, who is the godchild of the Rothschilds, the Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of England. He is the finance pillar. And then you have Harry, Bunker Harry, which, let's face it, that is not the name that's going to go down in history. What it is you've got Harry and military accolades, regardless of whether they're bought. They're not going to go on about how we complained in 200 years. They're just going to look at it and they're going to go, oh, he's a war hero. But together, they become the 3 kings of a globalist world. They are being protected. They are being set up. And the feud and the puff pieces and everything in between is literally smoke and mirrors. All to distract you. It's shocking just how much they have hidden from us. How much we have not questioned. As I say, I will put everything that I can in the description box. Let me know what you think. There is more, but at the moment I am concerned after an hour of information that in fact your heads might come off their shoulders. So let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and hopefully I will be back, unless obviously YouTube decide to tank this.